Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Maria Parham, editorial page editor for the Arizona Daily Star. Tonight on AZ Illustrated Metro, visit the border and see an international mass meant to push for immigration reform. We'll find out about a new ASU program to improve government. Then we'll check in on research about the civility of online commenters. Finally, we'll get an update on an effort to lower healthcare costs in Arizona. But first, a look at today's top stories.
The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals issued an emergency stay putting Arizona's new medical abortion law on hold. The law limiting the use of pill-induced abortions went into effect yesterday. Earlier this week, a federal judge in Tucson refused Planned Parenthood's request to block the law. The Arizona Supreme Court has now explained its December 2013 ruling allowing an increase in campaign contribution limits. Arizona's highest court says a law approved by voters in 1998 sets forth a formula for determining campaign contribution limits for state candidates, but does not actually set those limits. The ruling was a split decision. The majority reasoned had voters intended to fix static contributions, they could have easily and clearly done so. That ruling came the same day that the U.S. Supreme Court issued an opinion on campaign finances for federal candidates. The NewsHour will have more on that story. And Governor Jan Brewer warned today that the threat of wildfires is even more intense this year due to the ongoing drought. She's warning people to be careful because nearly 200 wildfires already this year were all preventable, according to the governor. And that's a look at tonight's headlines.
Hundreds attended a Catholic Mass at the International Border Fence in Nogales yesterday. It honored the thousands who have died crossing the desert. As Fernanda Chavarri reports, Catholic leaders also called for immigration reform.
Catholic bishops from across the country prayed for the thousands of migrants who have died in their attempt to cross into the United States illegally.
We know that the border is lined with unmarked graves of thousands who have died alone and nameless. We are here today to say they are not forgotten. Sometimes they're called illegal aliens, an expression that makes them sound like Martians. But they are our neighbors. They are our brothers and sisters.
O'Malley says the event was not to propose a quick fix to a complex issue.
Immigration laws, to be just, have to protect human rights and human life and not undermine them. We acknowledge and we support the role of our government to enforce our laws. The rule of law must prevail. But our laws must change if they violate God-given rights and undermine the common good. We can no longer tolerate the human suffering caused by this broken system. Families are separated, migrant workers are exploited, and tragically, human beings are dying on both sides of this wall. The suffering and death must end.
Standing on the U.S. side of the border fence, bishops gave Holy Communion to men and women in Mexico through the fence.
We see the immigration question in our country not only as an economic issue, not only as a political issue, but most especially a moral and ethical issue, which is why the Church is engaged in this question.
We do, as a faith community, bring the humanity and this focus on loving our neighbors. And I think, for me, the really wonderful thing today is bringing, some really high-profile religious figures in America down here.
As chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration, I call today upon Congress to act this year on immigration reform.
The bishops want to highlight the many dangers that come with illegal immigration, such as human trafficking, drug trafficking, and migrant exploitation. Elizondo says a broken immigration system also affects people who were born in the United States, because each year about 100,000 U.S. citizen children have at least one parent deported.
We are hopeful that the President, Obama, Congress, and the American public will heed our call for reform. Support for immigration reform, already at record heights among the American public, will only grow. We stand ready to work with members on both sides of the aisle in the House of Representatives to find a solution to our broken system this year.
I felt very emotional as it was happening. We got to observe and listen to a really moving homily by Archbishop O'Malley, and it was just very touching in Spanish and in English, talking about the unifying factors between us all and how we're all neighbors.
Hoy el Evangelio comienza.
People on both sides of the international border participated in the Mass.
Half of our group on this side and half of our group is on the other side, having different experiences, and I just think it's great to have it right here so that we can, on both sides of the wall, experience the words that we've heard today, but it also feels so separating.
The Diocese of Tucson hosted a two-day event where Catholic leaders from across the country traveled the desert, met with migrants in Mexico, and visited a shelter.
We had an opportunity to meet with the Border Patrol, and we're very grateful to Chief Manuel Padilla for his hospitality and helping us see some of their struggles, some of the challenges that they face, some of the dangers that are available and around them.
Pope Francis recently visited an island where African migrants die trying to reach Europe. The bishops want faith-based leaders across the country and eventually the Pope to get a sense of the struggles along this border.
I know from past experiences on trips like this that you feel so strongly in the moment, and then you go home and you get back into your routine and you forget what happens. And so I just hope that being here as a group of people, that we can carry each other along and trying to remember and trying to spread the word and the stories that we hear.
Arizona State University is launching a new center to study government and policy. In our next segment from 8, Arizona PBS in Phoenix, we take a look at the center's plans to study new uses of technology, data, and public engagement to design government programs.
ASU researchers are set to join an elite group of international experts on a study that looks to improve modern governance. Joining us now for more on this formidable task is Eric Johnson, director of the Center for Policy Informatics at ASU, and Justin Longo, also from ASU Center for Policy Informatics. It is pronounced informatics, correct?
It is.
All right, I'm off to a good start then, because this could be pretty complicated. It's obviously the goal is to get better government, but a research network on opening governance, what does that mean?
It means technology is changing the way that we work. And so it changes how we work in terms of what Google can do, but it also changes how we can work in terms of what government can do. And so as these possibilities come, you can either embrace them or you can try to resist them. What we're trying to do is figure out what is the best uses of technology within government so that we can take advantage of this amazing democratic surplus of the people.
Are there examples of what we're talking about here, to where there's a particular issue, you look at the numbers, you crunch a few numbers and get some kind of a result, or at least an idea?
Well, there's particular ways to get people involved. Ted, I saw your show on Friday and you had your political panel talking about, amongst other things, the budgeting process.
Yes.
To have a state of 6+ million people and a budget of 9 billion people decided by 3 people is a little bit odd. Participatory budgeting is one mechanism of getting a number of people around the issues of how to decide a budget for a particular location, getting them together around a discussion of what the priorities are and how to spend and budget for a location.
As far as the research on something like this goes, is it a little similar to like sabermetricians in baseball? Are you looking at numbers to move ideas, or vice versa? How's this work?
So there's elements of that. And so the MacArthur grant that we just got is a $5 million grant to study this over the next 3 years. And there's 3 sort of key dimensions of it. The first is, how do we open up government to get expertise in? And so we have experts around the public that have something to say about government, that can contribute to their communities. And so you have new programs like Code for America or Teach for America or Habitat for Humanity, but how do we get people's skills to be applied to improving their community? The second aspect is how do we get data out? The government collects a tremendous amount of information, and this information is very valuable. You can see that because if you look at the biggest companies and the biggest success stories of the last 10 years, the key element between them all is they were data focused. Google, eBay, Facebook, Twitter, all of them have a data emphasis onto it. But government can also take advantage of that aspect. And the third is what Justin was just referencing, which is this sort of co-production of governance, getting people more involved because they care.
Well, and yes, and to that point, you can give some lawmakers absolutely all the evidence they need to choose A, but because A is not within their policy mindset, they are going to choose B. How do you get around that?
Well, I think that through the process of argumentation and persuasion, one of the things about the internet is people look at it in its current state and think, really, we're going to use the internet to facilitate public discussions. The internet's given us more arguing, but not necessarily better arguing. One of our objectives in this research project is how do we get better at arguing, and arguing in the sense of trying to persuade each other of what we think is the right thing to do. And I believe that we can actually do that. We can work towards better arguing and actually get better persuasive argument and better outcomes through persuading each other.
Well, I think anyone who's read the comments section of anything that's online right now would probably say that the less of that, the better. When you research something like this, what do you study? What kind of data do you look at?
So if you're studying the comment section of a discussion,
yes,
technology can allow for the noise to be suppressed. And so it can study, because people in general understand what a good comment is. Even if they don't agree with the comment, they can understand something that's informative, valuable, that contributes to the conversation, even if it's politically or ideologically opposite of them. They also can identify when someone's just trying to provoke them. And so we've studied, especially right after a couple years ago, something that we call crowdsourcing civility, which allows for a lot of people to study the comment sections and actually allow for the good conversations to filter to the top, but the noise to be suppressed. That's a technology solution to a very basic challenge.
When you do these kinds of studies, can you actually see the raw numbers panning out in a certain direction?
Yeah, Eric?
Yeah, and that's what's new now, is that governance is taking place in a lot of different forums that never were before. And so online communities, and what we studied was what works in online communities, what doesn't, to make them sustainable, to give people a sense that they have a voice, that they can actually change what's happening. Because if an online community doesn't work, unlike our governance, you can just switch to another online community. You have the ability to opt out. And so it gives you this wonderful natural experiment that you can test. This approach worked within Reddit, but it didn't work over here.
Yeah. Yeah, are we talking about moving the battleship here, or is this something that can change relatively quickly?
No, I think it's a long-term process of both getting the technology right as well as reestablishing the parameters of what good argumentation looks like. You're right about the modern internet, or the current internet, that the language and the interaction is a lot to be desired. That's part of a process of relearning, but it's part of also a process of getting the technology right to facilitate that kind of argumentation, which is more effective than what we see today.
And what do we do to get the technology right? How do you go about that particular aspect?
You scientifically study it instead of stumble toward it. And so that's one of the key aspects of this grant. There's a couple people that are involved in this grant, including Beth Novak, who was Obama's original CTO. And she was also responsible for all the open governance laws and the open data laws that we saw as soon as he took office. The other person that's the real heavy hitter is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who is credited for inventing the internet. And so the question is, how do we architect these spaces of which we already participate in ways that allow us to do good governance? Because people are frustrated with government. You probably hear that a lot. And we take that as a positive sign because it means they still care. What we are demonstrating is two things. One, academics is not going to sit back and wait for government to change itself. We are going to provide evidence for, in this case or in this locality, here's a wonderful example. Why can't Mesa use it? Why can't Phoenix use it? And in fact, Mesa and Phoenix are relatively on the forefront of using technology and participatory methods to improve their governance.
I know that there's a core group of 12 experts in all these diverse disciplines. I think you mentioned a couple of them there. Is that the core experts? Because there's an advisory panel as well, correct?
Yeah, the advisory panel is another 50 or 60 who's who in terms of government, technology, economics, et cetera.
You're going to be able to get the advisory panel and the core of experts all agreeing that this shows improvement, or this A plus B equals C?
Maybe not agreement, but movement towards agreement. And again, based on solid argumentation and persuasion, I think we can move towards a consensus position that there are certain avenues that we can try that would be more effective than others. Everyone's always going to have their own opinion, but I think in this group we're going to see a lot of persuasive argumentation.
And so after the study is, a 3-year study?
It's a 3-year study that just kicked off.
Okay, so after 3 years, how will the results be presented?
They're going to be presented continuously. The key is that a lot of people are doing this on their own right now. One of the big goals that we have is to coordinate the efforts so that we have a systematic way of approaching government instead of a lot of individuals kind of poking at it. And so it's not going to stop after 3 years. In fact, it's just going to galvanize what's currently happening.
Very interesting stuff. Good luck. We're all rooting for you. You get some good results there. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Ted.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next News Hour, Judy Woodruff talks to IMF Chief Christine Lagarde about Ukraine, Russia, and more. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
The U.S. Army is shrinking. After the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's returning to peacetime levels.
An army of this size is larger than required to meet the demands of our defense strategy.
Some in Congress and the Pentagon worry the cuts go too far. I'm Linda Wertheimer, right-sizing the Army on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Next, we build on some of the discussion in the previous segment and look more at online comments. 3 weeks ago, we heard from a University of Arizona researcher who studied town halls with a grant from the National Institute for Civil Discourse. Tonight, Andrea Kelly checks in with another set of Institute grant recipients. They studied language and behavior in online comments.
Joining me in the studio now is Kate Kenski, an associate professor in the University of Arizona Communications Department, and Steve Rains, also an associate professor in the U of A Communications Department. Thanks to you both for coming in, and we want to find out what you were looking for when you studied online comments in the Arizona Daily Star. Steve, we'll start with you.
Sure, Andrea. Well, what we did is we collected 3 weeks worth of posts or comments to the Daily Star news articles. During 2011, we had about 6,000 total comments over a little over 300 stories. And what we did is we looked for incidents of incivility in those comments. And by incivility, I mean not disagreement, but things that were name-calling, aspersion, which would be making fun of someone's idea, or talking negatively about someone's idea. We looked at things like calling people a liar or claiming people were lying. And we also looked at something called pejorative for speech. So that would be things like calling people a crybaby or a whiner or things like that, that were specifically associated with the way in which they were communicating. And so what we wanted to do is get a sense of how prevalent is incivility. Are there things, contextual factors that make incivility more or less common? And so that was the gist of our project.
And Kate, what did you find?
Well, we found that incivility is common in comments. In fact, we found incidents of incivility 22% of the time in the comments that we analyzed over the 3-week period. The most common form of incivility ended up being name-calling. Now, we recognize that sometimes people can do name-calling in jest, and so we were just looking strictly at, did someone call someone an inappropriate name or not? Did they use vulgarity or whatever it was? And so 1 out of 5 comments. Out of the various articles to which people responded, at least 55% of those articles received some kind of comment that fell into our categories of incivility. One of the interesting things that we found was that when people made incivil comments, people actually became more engaged. And by that I mean, when you look at those thumbs up or thumbs down signs, we get the most reactions out of comments when they are in fact uncivil. Uncivil comments are less likely to receive positive thumbs up, much more likely to receive those thumbs down. We found that different things can affect whether or not uncivil comments are made. For example, topic matters. Sports articles are likely to receive a lot of uncivil comments, as are topics about politics, the economy, taxes, and crime. Those are the ones that really trigger people. In addition, we found that sometimes it was the author of the article that made a difference. And so, for example, when our local cartoonist David Fitzsimmons writes something, that gets a reaction, and about 35% of the comments made to Fitzsimmons' articles will in fact generate some form of incivility.
Okay, so he's a little bit of draws a little bit of fireworks.
Which, of course, I'm sure would say that's part of what he would see as his job, to be that lightning rod, and he does it. Whereas other reporters or columnists less likely to get the same levels of uncivil interaction.
Steve, what do you think we can learn from this?
Well, I think we can learn a couple of things. One, I think there's maybe a tendency to paint with a broad brush when it comes to incivility. That is that people are just going online and they have an axe to grind and this is a perfect venue to do it. That's not the case at all. We found that people who are more frequent commenters were actually less likely to be uncivil. And the folks who were uncivil were folks who would participate, made one comment during the time period. We also found that incivility was pervasive across topics. As Kate mentioned, it was more frequent in some topics than others, but sports, for example, had a great deal of incivility. Even entertainment articles, I think it was about 15% of the articles or comments were uncivil. So I think that incivility is much more nuanced than one might suspect, just casually browsing the comment section of any newspaper.
Now, I understand it's not your jobs to make recommendations, but should people be changing their behaviors when they're thinking about commenting online? Do you have any recommendations?
Well, one thing that we don't know is that we don't know, who decides not to respond because exchanges can be uncivil. We suspect, and we're going to investigate this further, that there are perhaps some people who are more sensitive to uncivil comments than others. And so what I would say is this: we chose the forms of incivility that we chose, name-calling, aspersions, lying, because we think that when people make those kinds of comments, they do have that possibility of halting the discourse. If you're trying to have a serious policy discussion and you call someone a liar, that ends the social exchange, because there's no point in continuing the conversation if you're basically saying that what the person has to say isn't going to be truthful. And so if people can hold back a little bit on the intensity of their comments, try to make those same arguments, but doing it without calling someone a liar or saying that someone's belly aching, I think we would have more productive discussions online.
Last question to you, Steve. Should the websites that are allowing people to make comments be considering any changes in either what they're allowing comments on or how they're moderating those?
Well, they are moderated, and the Arizona Daily Star at the time we examined it was moderated. It had a list of guidelines for people, for users, and they did remove comments when they were flagged. What we're seeing now is more and more of these online websites are being associated with social network sites. So you have to have a Facebook account to log in. And what that does is it removes some of the anonymity, which in some ways might foster more civil discussions.
There is one more thing that I think newspapers can do. They could consider, instead of having the like-dislike buttons, having a respect button. There have been some studies that show that when you just have that respect button, what it allows a person to do is say, I acknowledge what you're saying, even if I don't disagree. And so that's just one small structural change that newspapers could very easily do, I think, to promote greater discussion and greater support for civil and productive exchanges.
Thank you both for coming in to talk about this.
Now we'll check in on a program we introduced you to last year. Larry Aldrich and Emily Coyle with the Employers Health Alliance of Arizona join me in the studio. Larry and Emily, thanks for being here today. Larry, let's start by just talking about the goals of this organization and where you are in organizing it.
Thank you. When we were here last summer, we were called the Arizona Business Coalition on Health, and we are now the Employers Health Alliance of Arizona, which is more descriptive of who we represent. We represent employers. We are focused on health and healthcare, and it really is an alliance to try to bring common thinking together to catalyze change, improvement on healthcare delivery, catalyze change and improvement on health and wellness, and we'll talk about our program, and to really use the data and the quality and the measurements to make sure we're making progress in both of those directions. Ultimately, the alliance is about better health, better health care, and achieving all of that at lower cost.
And right now you're just in southern Arizona, but you're planning to branch out in Maricopa County and other places?
Thank you. It is of Arizona, so our intention is to be statewide, but our focus has been in Tucson, and our focus will remain for a long time in Tucson. Whatever we do in Phoenix will be somewhat different, complementary, but we'll have some benefits coming back to Tucson.
Emily, talk to us some about the programs and the employers you're working with and some of the things that you've accomplished so far.
Well, one of the things that we've been focusing on for the past year is a community health planning seed grant in partnership with the Pima County Health Department. And we've developed a program called the Employee Wellness Work Group, which is under the Community Health Improvement Plan by the county under Healthy Pima. And the purpose of this work group is to bring together employers, public and private employers, to develop a community action plan around enhancing employee wellness by increasing physical activity. So we have two strategies around that, which is to promote the importance of wellness in physical activity among employers, and then also the second strategy is to help employers engage their employees in increased physical activity and enhanced wellness, and to maintain that increased physical activity for better overall health.
Can you give us some specific examples so that our audience can identify with the things that they may be asked or encouraged to do?
Sure. Well, you spend a good portion of your day in the workplace, and for many of us that may be sitting in front of a computer, you've heard of the opportunity to have walking desks, treadmills on your desk, but not everybody has that opportunity. There are options. For example, if you can meet CDC recommended guidelines for physical activity, that's 150 minutes per week. That's 30 minutes 5 times a day. If every couple hours you get up and you do a brisk walk around your work area or around the building for 10 minutes, you can break that up for those 30 minutes each day. For 10 minutes, you're meeting those CDC recommended guidelines for moderate physical activity for adults. So that's just one strategy that may be available for people.
So are there some incentives that businesses and the ones who are members and not members are thinking of employing to try to get people up and moving, because a lot of us need those incentives?
Mm-hmm. I think that one way, there are many companies that will provide, partner with one of the local organizations such as the YMCA to provide discounted memberships so their employees can have access to those wellness facilities and rec facilities. There's also, perhaps there's discounts in health premiums, but really it's about improving access to those resources.
And I would just add that there's no magic pill here, no magic bullet. It's hard work. But what we try to do is really try to understand what are the barriers. What's in the way? Is it a child care barrier? Is it a transportation barrier? And so how are those things to get out of the way so people who want to do better can do better things for themselves?
Sounds like a good program, and good luck in keeping improving it and getting more members then. Larry and Emily, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
That's our show. To keep up with the latest news and watch the segments from this and other editions of AZ Illustrated, go to our website, news.azpm.org. I'm Maria Parham. Thanks for watching.